Hey guys, so I just recently watched the movie Obsession and I love the movie. But one thing I really loved is all the perspectives that other people have shared. I've seen a lot of videos where people, based off what they've experienced in life, can relate to or can kind of identify certain things within this movie that I absolutely love, right? So I want to share my perspective. I'm a young man and I've noticed a lot of people talk about Bear, how Bear is the villain, which I completely agree with. But today I wanted to kind of dissect his subconscious mind, his identity, his ways of thinking, why the actions he took made sense to him, and how his actions eventually led to the downfall of everything. Because I noticed there was a lot of, well, not a lot, first of all, but there was a lot of kind of things that I noticed and that I could relate to in Bear, and I think other young men can relate to, and I think a lot of us need to hear this. So why is this important to me, and why is what Bear did, why could I relate to that? So because as a man we need to understand that our self-respect and our self-control that we have for ourselves is extremely important, not only to us, but because it can affect other people around us, whether that be partners, siblings, our kids, in either a positive or negative way. The things we do behind closed doors and the way we think and the things we believe in have consequences in our life, good or bad. And as we see in the movie, Bear's identity is what has ruined so many people's lives, and something that us as men and even women too, this relates to everybody, but I'm talking to the young men specifically because that is the perspective that I have. So in my opinion, Bear's lack of awareness, lack of self-understanding, the lack of love he had for himself, the lack of action, the lack of confidence, and the lack of accountability is what led to all of this. I believe that Bear was being led by desire in this whole movie. Desire was the most important thing to him. His desires were the only thing that mattered, and in turn, that ruined his life and others and other people's lives. So, what led Bear to be so dangerous? What behaviors and beliefs did he have that led him to be the villain of this movie? So, Bear's identity. What behaviors did Bear have that caused this? Like I said, his lack of action. Throughout the movie, he did not take action. When Nikki was doing creepy things, cutting his hair, making a cat memorial, making cat sandwiches, he really didn't take action. When he spoke with her, he was very passive. You know, when he had a problem and Nikki sort of tempted him and seduced him, he forgot all about his problems and got tempted by her. He couldn't ask Nikki out. We saw this in the beginning. Lack of action that he displayed. His lack of confidence. Honestly, his whole character was this nice, shy guy, low self esteem man. Even in the opening scene, he wanted the opinions of others. What his friend said, Ian, really, that really mattered to him. A lack of confidence, being able to ask Nikki out again. His fear of rejection is a direct parallel to his lack of confidence that he has with himself. Lack of accountability. He was never accountable of his own actions. Even later on in the movie, when he realized he was screwing Nikki over big time and basically had her enslaved in her own body, he really didn't understand the magnitude of his actions. Even Nikki's actions, he really didn't hold Nikki accountable. when he was speaking with his friends, he always kind of um defended Nikki, you know? In the At the end of the movie, when he was talking to the guy back at the store, he wasn't accountable in his actions. He worded it in a way that took blame off of himself. When Nikki was making cat sandwiches, he really didn't hold her to any accountability. A normal person would have broken up with her, you know? But this lack of accountability that he has within himself led to him not taking Nikki accountable. He also had a lack of love for himself. We can just tell in the movie, low self-esteem, extremely insecure, and he wants Nikki's love. He wants Nikki's attention because he has a lack of love for himself, which makes sense because his cat died and his grandmother died, which I'm assuming were two sources of love. But he never had this same love for himself. He also had a lack of self-respect. Everything that Nikki did to him, he couldn't set boundaries. We even see in the boys' night out scene, Nikki eventually gets her way because Bear has a weak sense of self-respect. So basically, Bear was extremely insecure and very weak mentally, which as a man is extremely dangerous, because when you are insecure and weak mentally, your ego really takes control over you. It doesn't allow you to take responsibility. It's what really caused everything to crumble because of how insecure he was. Even the start of the movie, his insecurity didn't allow him to think of the thought of being rejected, so that's why he had to break the One Wish Willow. So in his mind, I believe that the pain of self-realization and being self-accountable is worse than seeing others suffer. Because like we see in the movie, he was never accountable. I don't think he ever said I'm sorry once, and he would rather see Nikki, and at one point in the movie he knows that she is suffering, he still carries on. And another thing that is extremely important is Bear made a humongous decision while he was emotional, while he was in a desperate state, and in a state of lacking. At the beginning of the movie, when he breaks the wish, he was emotional, desperate, and in a state of loss, of lack. And I think in our lives, that is a big mistake. We should never make decisions or make statements or conclusions when we are extremely emotional. So, the next point I want to get to is Bear is the victim. Hold on, because I know a lot of people are going to get mad, but Bear is the victim to his own self. Bear is the victim to his desire. I'm not saying Nikki isn't the victim. Nikki is completely the victim. But in Bear's mind, the psychology we're trying to understand, he is the victim of his desire. And that is what explains all of the actions that he took. So in the movie, Bear is technically in control over Nikki. He has the power over her. Nikki is essentially worshipping Bear in the movie. He has control like he wants. He has Nikki's love and attention. His desire of Nikki is being fulfilled. So how does it go so bad when he got everything he wished for? How does this go so bad? Because in the movie and in real life, being led by desire will lead you to a road to hell. Desire is the fall of man and woman, right? But his desire is so bad because he lacks control and understanding of himself. Like we said, he lacks the self-awareness, the accountability, and it shows later on in the movie too why, and I will get into that. But this lack of control over himself leads to a life that he eventually has no control over, because he does have the power to control Nikki. But because he cannot control himself, because he is weak minded, he loses this control. He loses control over himself first, which in turn leads to Nikki being uncontrollable. It leads to Nikki going crazy. Because desire is in control of Bear. It is the thing that everything revolves around. It is Bear's reference point, right? If as long as his desire is being fulfilled, he does not care what is happening. He does not care that his cat was put for a memorial. He does not care that he just ate his cat. He does not care that his girlfriend has gone crazy watching him sleep. That his door is duct tape. Anything Nikki does, he does not truly care, because he does not change, because his desires are still being met. So what are his desires? What is controlling him? On the surface level, we know that it is Nikki. It is Nikki's love. It is her attention. It is, her attention towards him. It is the relationship. So everything that he wants out of Nikki is things that in his mind he cannot give himself, which is an illusion. And I've talked about this in another video, how the external will never heal you internally. That is a fact. Let me say it again. The external will never heal you internally. And we see in the movie, everything that Bear lacks, he looks for something outside of him. The confidence, he uses the one wish willow. The relationship, he uses the one wish willow. There are so many things that he looks for outside of him to fulfill him internally, which leads to his demise and everyone else's demise. So underneath the surface level understanding that he wants Nikki's love, what does he want? He wants physical pleasures, of course. He wants companionship. His grandma just died. His cat just died. He wants validation. As we see in the opening scene, he's unsure. He wants the opinions of others. He wants confidence. He's just very unconfident. We know that he lacks confidence. I think he also wants empowerment, because I say that because he has a very hard time taking action. He wants validation, so I think he looks for Nikki to fulfill all of these wishes. And I think in real life, men and women, they lack certain things internally and they look for it in a partner. And this eventually leads to a very unhealthy, toxic relationship, because often this might happen unconsciously. We kind of put expectations on our partner, and we want our partner to fulfill these expectations that, first of all, we have not communicated, second of all, are unrealistic, and third of all, will never be fulfilled because we have to heal internally. No one else can do it. No other human being can do it for us. So, back to what I was saying. Everything that he wants, it's normal. It's not evil. I don't think his desires came from an evil place. But the problem is that he was constantly seeking outward to heal himself, which never works out. It doesn't work out for Bear, and it won't work out for you. So, another thing that I noticed, the dynamic that Nikki and Bear have is a direct parallel to the dynamic of the relationship Bear has with himself. So the same way that we see their relationship play out, I believe is the same relationship that Bear has within his mind. A very unhealthy relationship. So it's very clear that Bear doesn't understand Nikki at all. The dad situation, the whole love story, romance thing, getting the necklace, he really doesn't understand her on a deeper level. So it is clear that he really cannot conceptualize Nikki as an actual human being with dreams, with emotions, with perspectives. And we see this because he tells her, why can't you be normal? Why can't you be Nikki? Which is very ignorant to say, because I think it's self-explanatory that we just cannot be normal in a snap of a finger. It takes work. Why can't you be Nikki? At this point in the movie, it's pretty clear that Nikki is not Nikki no more. But he's still searching and needs that image of Nikki that he once desired. So it is clear that Bear lacks the understanding of Nikki on a deeper level, which makes me believe that Bear doesn't understand himself. He doesn't understand why he wants the things he wants. He doesn't understand his emotions. He doesn't, like we said before, everything that he lacked in all comes from a lack of understanding, a lack of introspection. He doesn't really know why he wants Nikki. He doesn't know that he wants the companionship and the validation. He doesn't know why he desires what he desires. The consequences of his actions, I believe. Hold on, my mind just blanked. But we're 16 minutes in, and I do not want to cut this video. I like making all my videos, but no cuts. But anyways, I believe he takes everything at face value, without much deep thinking and understanding. So the same way he doesn't understand Nikki is the same way he doesn't understand himself. My second point, the lack of accountability he has for himself, he also lacks with Nikki. I said this before. He's very passive and avoids a lot of conflict, like the cat memorial, the cat sandwich, the duct tape door, all of that. He really doesn't assess the major flags that he sees in Nikki, which parallels to the red flags that he doesn't assess within himself. You know, he doesn't try to come to a solution, because all he wants is his desire. Like we said before, it doesn't matter the red flags. He just wants what he desires. So he really isn't aware of what is happening. He is seeing what is happening, all the crazy things that Nikki is doing, but I don't think he truly grasps just how insane his situation is, because of his urging desire for this image of Nikki. And this image of Nikki, this desire of Nikki, is so strong that it supersedes literally anything. Right? So, let's talk about now the consequences of being led by desire. The consequences that Bear faced, and the consequences that we face when we become led by desire. So a quote from the Bible, Matthew 7:13, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it." Which means being led by desire is very easy. Bear's lack of action, his weak sense of self, gravitated towards doing what is easy. Because what is easy now, I like to say, what is easy now is hard later, and what is hard now is easy later. If Bear took action, truly assessed the situation, and had the balls to do what had to be done, all of this would have never happened. But he chose to be led by his desires, because the road to hell feels like heaven. He wanted to feel good. He wanted that intimacy. He didn't care about anything else. He just wanted that intimacy because it felt good. So like I said, being led by desire is extremely easy. It feels amazing in that moment only. Only in that moment. When you are indulging in your unhealthy desires, in your vices, only in that moment will it feel amazing. But the next day, it will feel terrible. And that is the illusion of the devil. And this movie perfectly symbolizes that. Because desire preys on the weak minded. Bear is extremely weak minded, so desire had complete control over him. So this is why I notice many young men fall into, where it eventually gets to a point where as a man, as a young man, or even as a woman, where you put so much energy and action into your desires that they eventually destroy your life and you eventually become destroyed by this desire. We could take corn for instance, alcohol, smoking, just any lustful thing. It feels amazing in the moment. You think you're free until you try to stop. You don't realize you're addicted until you try and stop. And then you realize that's when you are in that's when you realize that you are not in control. That something outside of you is now controlling you. What you wish for, your desire, is now controlling you. And we see that in the movie that eventually gets to a point where Nikki is honestly the one in control. Nikki is scaring Bear. Nikki is in control because eventually the lack of control Bear had for himself manifested into a life that he no longer could control. So, the behavior of young men and how to not be like Bear. So now I think everything that I talked about in the movie, I think I got all that, right? So now I want to talk about how us as young men, us as men, even women, how to not be like Bear. So, I'm 20 right now. So I was in high school not too long ago, right? So I know how it is to be a high school boy. You know, a lot of us, our morals are wrong. We're very lustful. All the media that we consume is what it promotes is lust, money, drugs, the songs we listen to, the movies we watch, the TV shows we watch, everything. There is nothing really in mainstream society that is pointing us to be good. It is not teaching us valuable morals or traits to adopt. It is just telling us that how many bodies we have determines how valuable we are as men, or how much money that we can make determines how valuable we are as men. So our desires as young men are heavily influenced based off of what we consume. And the options of consumption that we have, for the most part, are not good, which leads to relationships going terrible. In the YouTube videos I was watching about obsession, there was a lot of people in the comment section saying how they were once with a man, or maybe they still are with a man, who were extremely toxic in their lives. So that's why this is so important for us to understand the impacts that our actions have and the impact of getting lost in desire, just like Bear did. So, a big thing too is corn is a big aspect of young men's lives. And I could make a whole another video on this, but I will try to not go too off topic. But corn completely rewires your perception of relationships and women. We often in turn see women as objects because we lack a deep understanding of just human nature. We don't really care about a woman's emotions. We don't really care about a woman's emotions when we just dwell in corn, because that is not what corn teaches us. All it teaches us subconsciously is that pleasure is the main goal. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter how we get it, but our orgasm, our pleasure needs to be fulfilled. And it creates an unrealistic expectation of women. And that's what Bear had over Nikki. An unrealistic expectation of Nikki. And it led to his demise. So, young men see love as sexual, romantic, physical. They're kind of honestly taught that. I'm going to be honest. They are taught that. And that is just one dimension to what a relationship is. That is just a small part to what love is. Love is a lot of complex situations, complex emotions, vulnerability, listening, understanding, sacrifice. And the lack of this understanding is what Bear and a lot of young men end up seeking into. They adopt a lot of bad traits. They often, like we said with Bear, lack of accountability, of action, of self-respect. And in turn, this really, first it rots us on the inside. And then it starts spreading to everyone around us. And that's why I made this video, to be aware of our actions and what we consume and the things we dwell into, and how we can learn from Bear and not do what he did, to basically do the opposite of everything Bear did, you know. And you know, even in the Bible, a lot of the stuff I'm saying talks about this, to not fall into lust, to temptation, to all of this, everything that Bear did. So I think that's all I have to say. That was a long video, but if you made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate you. Like, subscribe, comment, share, do all that. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.